the headquarters of the railway, but most visitors start their journey at Hythe. Hythe is a spacious terminus station with a roof, 4 platforms and a centre release road. It has a small cafe and a well-stocked shop as well. At the end of the platform there is a compact signal box controlling the whole of the station. On the left is the turntable where the engine is turned after every trip. As we steam out of the station, we are soon alongside the Royal Military Canal on the right and the backs of the last houses of Hythe on the left. Now we are in open country on the southern edge of Romney Marsh. The marsh was ideal to build a double-track mainline railway, and in no time we were rattling along at the maximum speed allowed of 25 miles per hour. There are tales of Captain Hoey getting up to 60 between Hythe and New Romney. Between here and Dymchurch there are many streams and level crossings to cross. The speed has to drop to mark 5 miles per hour, approaching the level crossings, of which there are many. After 5 miles of fast running, the train arrives at Dymchurch Station. When new, Dymchurch Station looked very much like Hythe and New Romney stations, with an overall roof and lots of facilities, including sidings, a signal box and even a turntable. Over the years it has been simplified. The station has lost the roof and now only has 2 platforms with basic shelters connected by the original 1925 footbridge. The old semaphore signals have been replaced by colour lights and are controlled from a small office next to the up waiting room. During the war, Dymchurch Station became Army headquarters for the Romney Marsh area. A mile from Dymchurch is St Mary's Bay Station, now a request-only halt. This station once had a full set of buildings, sadly all gone. St Mary's Bay was mostly used by the campers staying at the nearby holiday camps. The railway crosses a few more ditches and streams before reaching Romney Warren Halt. A new station opened to serve the Romney Marsh Visitor Centre, one of many nature reserves now in the area. Soon afterwards the railway passes under the A259 Coast Road and starts its approach to New Romney Station. After going under the Folkestone to Hastings Coast Road, the train arrives at New Romney Station, the hub of the RHDR. This station has a large cafe and a shop, as well as a permanent model railway exhibition. New Romney is where the locomotives are housed, maintained, repaired, overhauled and sometimes even completely rebuilt. The loco shed is large enough to house all 11 locos. As can be seen in this photo, the locos are very well cared for. At the end of each day, the locos are checked, cleaned and covered up. Even the buffers have their own sock-like covers. The RHDR's locos are possibly the best looked after steam locomotives in the world. Next to the locomotive shed is a fully equipped repair workshop where almost any kind of repair can be completed, including major boiler repairs and wheel turning. The railway has a strict rota for locomotive overhauls, and usually 2 locos are out of service for a year. New Romney also has a carriage repair workshop which looks after the daily maintenance of the coaches and is also able to build new ones when required. On leaving New Romney Station, we dip under a low road bridge and enter the single-line section to Dungeness, passing the site of the now closed Southern Railway New Romney Station. For the first part of this section, the ride is most uninteresting as the train rattles along a long line of breeze block walls. It gives the appearance that we and the railway feel unwelcome. It could be Berlin in the 1960s. Soon the landscape opens up as the train approaches Dungeness. This is a real Marmite landscape. You will love it or hate it. Some people say it is the nearest you can get to a desert in the United Kingdom. It is dead flat as far as the eye can see for miles. Much is a nature reserve now and home to several rare breeds of birds, attracting lots of wildlife enthusiasts. There are very few landmarks around, but here we see one of them, a train passing the Pilot Pub at the beginning of this unique landscape. To avoid running around, like in a conventional terminus station, such as Hythe or Waterloo, Dungeness Station is halfway round a very large loop, beginning at Britannia Point. This means the train can return back to New Romney and Hythe without reversing. Dungeness Station is pretty simple with just one platform, a ticket office and a cafe. There is also another loop so that two trains can be at Dungeness at the same time. However, this loop is used very little these days. The cafe does some really good fish and chips and a wonderful mandarin orange gâteau. Until fairly recently, the railway has maintained the original fleet of 9 handsome steam locomotives, all designed by Henry Greenley. Recently, 3 more locos have joined the fleet, 1 steam from another miniature railway in Germany, and 2 brand new diesels. With the exception of numbers 4, 9 and 10, they were built by Davy Paxman of Colchester from 1925 and based on Sir Nigel Gresley's Pacific engines of the Great Northern and London and North Eastern Railways. Each locomotive cost £1,250 to build. The fleet is made up of 4 subclasses: 1, 2 and 3, 2-cylinder Pacific type passenger, 5 and 6, 2-cylinder mountain type goods, 7 and 8, 3-cylinder Pacific type passenger, 9 and 10, 2-cylinder Canadian Pacific type passenger. Engine 4 was built for construction purposes only and was never considered as part of the plan. All of the engines have had changes and improvements made to them over the years, such as the fitting and removal of smoke deflectors. New tenders have been made for all the locomotives. Usually, after an overhaul, the engine would be painted in a different livery, but not always. 1. Green Goddess. Green Goddess was ordered by Zborowski in 1924 before his fatal accident at Monza and would have been his engine. Before being delivered to New Romney, she was tested on the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway. Green Goddess has been in almost continuous service since the RHDR opened in 1926. Outwardly, her appearance has changed very little over the years. She is currently painted in LNER apple green livery. 2. Northern Chief. Northern Chief was ordered and built at the same time as Green Goddess and is identical. In 1936 she was given new boiler cladding and now runs with smoke deflectors and coupled to her original tender. She is painted in a livery very similar to the British Railways Standard Express passenger green livery of the 1950s and 60s. 3. Southern Maid. Southern Maid was to be named Southern Chief and was built in 1927. She is identical to Green Goddess and Northern Chief. Southern Maid has had lots of changes over the years, but is currently running in pretty near original condition and is painted in malachite green. 4. The Bug. The Bug is a real odd man out and never really fitted any of the RHDR plans. Even though she was designed by Greenley and his close friend Roland Martins as a miniature steam locomotive, she is much more a narrow gauge locomotive. She was ordered and built in 1926 as the main locomotive for the construction of the line and light goods traffic thereafter. By the time the Bug was delivered, most of the line's construction had been completed. Also, the requirement for light goods trains never materialised. There was no need to keep the Bug. The Bug was sold to a Blackpool Pleasure Park owner in 1933 and quickly sold again to a Belfast park in 1934 and renamed Sir Crawford and later on Jean. One day in 1972, Sir William McAlpine drove past a scrapyard in Belfast and saw on top of a pile of scrap something he semi-recognised. He went back to the scrapyard for a closer look. It soon clicked what he was looking at. Yes, it was the bug. McAlpine arranged for the bug to be returned to New Romney. A complete rebuild of the bug was soon underway, and the engine returned to service in July 1977, all at the expense of McAlpine. The bug is still in service today and is used on short trains on gala days or other special days. She is painted in LBSCR improved locomotive green livery. Yes, it is an umber colour, but that is another very long story. 5 and 6. Numbers 5, Hercules, and 6, Samson, were basically the same as the first 3 locos, except they were at 4 to 8 to 2s or mountains. That is, they have one extra pair of driving wheels. They were built especially for the proposed line from Hythe to Sandling Junction. Because of their longer wheelbase, they were seldom used during the pre-war years, as they often derailed running through the points. After the war, the old points were replaced with larger radius points, and the 2 engines have been regular performers since then. Both engines are in service today. Hercules in Midland Red and Samson in Great Eastern Blue. Typhoon. Number 7. The first of the 2 British outline 3-cylinder Pacifics were also built in 1927 and looked exactly the same as her 2-cylinder sisters. The idea behind the 3rd cylinder was that Howie wanted a faster and smoother locomotive. In reality, the extra cylinder did not offer any improvement in performance and was disconnected in 1936. This cylinder has never been removed from the engine and is only blanked off so it could be reinstated if the RHDR wished. Greenlee designed a special valve gear to operate the extra cylinder. In service, this valve gave much trouble and often tangled itself up. This was the main reason for giving up on the 3rd cylinder. When the valve gear was removed and the engine converted to a 2-cylinder locomotive, the driving wheels had to be re-quartered. Typhoon is painted in a British racing green livery and is on display on the Severn Valley Railway, Kidderminster. 8. Hurricane. Hurricane is the other 3-cylinder Pacific and often considered the best of the RHDR's locos. She was also Captain Howie's favourite, which he enjoyed driving. Like Typhoon, the 3rd cylinder was not a success, and the valve gear was too complicated and was removed in 1937. Hurricane's tender is unique because it has a dummy corridor in common with the LN, ER, A3 and A4 express locos. For a few years, in the late 1930s, Hurricane was renamed Blue Bottle. Hurricane has always been painted blue, usually a shade similar to Caledonian blue. 9. Winston Churchill and 10. Dr. Syn. Now we come to the 2 handsome Canadian type Pacifics. They are basically the same Greenlee design as the earlier engines, just a different outline. Most of the parts were actually manufactured at the RHDR's own New Romney workshops. The boilers, however, were made by Krauss of Munich, Germany. The final assembly was completed by the Yorkshire Engine Company in 1931. One of the reasons for choosing an engine with a different outline was that the driver had better protection during the winter months. When these new engines were coupled to a Canadian-style Vanderbilt tender complete with a water scoop. In 1962, these tenders, which gave much added atmosphere to these 2 engines, were scrapped and replaced by standard RHDR tenders. The 2 Canadian engines have swapped and changed names a few times. When built, number 9 was named Dr. Syn and number 10 Black Prince. In 1948, number 9, Dr. Syn, was renamed Winston Churchill, and number 10 became Dr. Syn. During the 1970s, number 9 was converted to oil firing for a few years. As there were no real savings in running costs, the engine changed back to burning coal. In the 1980s, number 10 was given a taller chimney, dome and sandbox, which has completely altered the engine's appearance, making the engine look as if it comes from the USA rather than Canada. Number 9 has been painted red for many years, and number 10 is painted black. Number 11, Black Prince. Black Prince is a fairly recent addition, arriving at New Romney in 1976. She was built in 1937 by Krupp of Essen, Germany, especially for an exhibition in Düsseldorf. After the exhibition, she was used on a 15-inch gauge miniature railway in Cologne, along with 2 other identical engines. These engines still survive and are part of the late Alan Bloom's collection at Bressingham, Diss, Norfolk. On joining the RHDR, she was confusingly given number 10's previous name of Black Prince. She's currently out of service awaiting repairs, but is often on display. Her appearance has changed since she arrived on the RHDR, but has always been painted in the standard German black livery with red underframe and wheels. The RHDR has used non-steam locos almost from the start, mainly for track repairs. During the early 1980s, the railway considered the use of a passenger diesel locomotive. After trials using one of the diesel locomotives from the Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway, the RHDR took delivery of their own purpose-built passenger diesel locomotive in 1983 and a second in 1989. These engines are mainly used on the early and late season trains, school trains, and an additional engine on high summer trains. For a long time, the RHDR has made use of very small internal combustion locos for track maintenance and emergency purposes. These engines are very rarely on display. One of these engines deserves some attention, however. In 1930, Captain Howie still wanted a loco with a lot more speed, so he came up with the idea of converting his own 1914 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost into a railway locomotive. The works at New Romney built a new body and lengthened the chassis, but kept the original engine and gearbox. A year later, Howie exchanged the engine for a more powerful 6-cylinder overhead valve, 45 horsepower Rolls-Royce engine. Even though it was Howie's plaything, it did actually do some valuable work during the winter months, hauling lightly loaded passenger trains. It is claimed that Howie achieved just over 60 miles per hour, hauling 4 coaches with this locomotive. In 1946, the engine was rebuilt again with a new metal body and a Fordson 20 horsepower lorry engine. The engine was broken up in December 1961. Currently, the railway has about 80 passenger coaches, including luggage vans, a bar car and an observation coach. All were built locally in the 1970s and 80s. Some of the early coaches are interesting because Howie wanted to run the railway for the whole year and not just in the summer. Some of the coaches were built with compartments and had steam heating, electric lighting and upholstered cushion seating. They were equal or better than a lot of the full-size coaches running on Britain's main lines in the 1920s. The railway even had its own versions of Pullman coaches and a royal saloon. Only a handful of these early coaches survive today. Very few of RHDR's goods wagons survive today, apart from some tipper wagons and a few vans. In the past, there were parcel vans, fish vans, open wagons and bogie ballast wagons. Since the 1960s, there has been no use for these vehicles. The railway today. The RHDR is still going strong today, albeit East Kent does not attract the number of holiday makers it did in the 50s and 60s. All of the original 10 steam locomotives are in great condition and in running order, with 4 to 6 in action in most days. All of the stations have much improved facilities. The railway no longer runs during the winter months apart from the school contract with Kent County Council, but opens from the spring half-term until the end of October. Throughout the year, there are many special events and gala days when, sometimes, all of the locomotives are in use. Generally, there is a regular half-hourly service from Hythe to New Romney and an hourly service from Hythe to Dungeness. Level crossings are still a problem, even though they are now protected by warning lights and barriers. Sadly, accidents still happen with the crossings. The most recent happened on 10th of September 2016, when Green Goddess hit a tractor standing on a crossing near Dymchurch. No one was hurt on this occasion, but in past level crossing accidents, passengers and RHDR drivers have sadly been killed. Today, the RHDR is a great steam railway to visit for a full-day tour. In July 2027, they will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the opening of the RHDR, and there will be a very impressive special event for that occasion. Meanwhile, head down to this remote corner of Kent and enjoy the experience of a miniature day on the track.